So I've recently deployed my new SaaS project and got it running on two separate machines, one in the United States in Texas and the other one in Europe in Amsterdam. Of course, both of the machines are very far away from each other, and for the projects in here, I decided to use SQLite. Yes, you're hearing me right, I use SQLite and it runs two machines in here, which means it's like scaled out horizontally. And both of these machines are very, very small, like shared CPU, which is the smallest sort of type of CPU, 1 GB of RAM, both of them have the same config, which is like making it like the cheapest VPS at all. They both like completely two different machines and they are running SQLite, and SQLite is synchronized between both of these machines instantaneously. Yes, everything works flawlessly. I'm pretty sure you're asking like a million questions now, like how is this possible? I thought SQLite lives on one single machine, and I thought SQLite is for mobile sort of databases. I'm pretty sure you've got a lot of questions about SQLite and why it's bad and why you hate it and why like the media, or I'm gonna say companies in general, try to sell you a DB server in general, like a managed DB server so you can pay more and pull you away from like they can use something completely for free for $0. SQLite, you don't need like an extra server that you need to manage, and you get all the perks that you would get with a normal DB server. Let me tell you how. So recently in here, if you haven't already seen, I've deployed my new SaaS projects in here that uses SQLite. Of course, it's not that big, huge thing that utilizes SQLite or has an intensive DB reads and writes, but it still uses SQLite. It's still two regions and multiple servers, and it can scale out even more to 5, 10 servers and still works absolutely the same thanks to Fly.io and the SQLite that I absolutely fell in love when I created this project. So matter of fact, when I created this project, it was my first time utilizing SQLite on a production ready sort of project, and man, it just went as smooth as possible. I absolutely fell in love with SQLite and how simple it was, and I literally completely forgot that I was using a database in the first place until I was just like about to deploy it. That took me 20 minutes, which was mind-blowing. So before we get started, let me just jump you right over here to why did I choose SQLite and what are like, the problems with SQLite, when you should choose SQLite, when you should not choose SQLite, and all this kind of stuff. So we all know there's a bunch of other DB servers in here. For example, there is PostgreSQL, or Postgres. I'm just going to call it as a short name, Postgres in here, which is an absolutely amazing database. I absolutely love Postgres. It has tons of awesome features and a lot of things going on. So of course, if you've got very big projects, I'm not going to tell you to move away from Postgres for, millions or I don't know, millions of users or operations or whatever. You need all this kind of features that Postgres has to offer. You can go with it. There's SQLite, which is super lightweight, easy to set up, everything. Like you can put easy in front of every single feature that SQLite has, and you're going to get it right. Or you've got MySQL in here, of course, which is also still pretty good. It's like in the middle between both of them, I would say. But I would say still prefer SQLite, over MySQL every single time. So before, when I was using servers, when I was using an actual server like Postgres or MySQL, what are the problems that I was seeing with SQLite that made me use those servers in the first place and not choose SQLite to move with? So the problems with SQLite before that I personally noticed, and it was like, I noticed like the community people or developers stumbling upon that made it not possible to use SQLite in a production ready kind of like projects, where most important one is like hard to do backups because, SQLite lives inside of the machine and hard to do the backups. But with the new, raise of like object storage and S3 and kind of stuff, it made it a little bit easier. And nowadays it's super easy to do that. So we're good. Like for the backups, hard to scale horizontally, and that's what I was talking about at the beginning of the video and how I did it. So now that's actually a lot simple as well. It's very, very easy, and you don't need to manage a lot pretty much. And the third one, or the third point in here, is how to migrate into a different DB in case of hitting some limitations. So for example, you chose SQLite in here, you started working with it, and all of a sudden you decided you want to use the, some vector embeddings inside of your database, which Postgres kind of like provides with a PG vector plugin. So you can't do that in SQLite, and you're deciding to move to Postgres. But before, it was impossible because you're using raw SQLite or raw SQL queries and stuff. But now with ORMs like Prisma or Drizzle, you could use that. You can easily switch between one provider and the other. So this one, we can tick it as well. So all these, tick for the 3 of those in here because all problems are solved. And now you can use SQLite knowing that you would handle everything peacefully. So for me personally, why would I choose SQLite for my projects? Or I should rephrase this differently. So why would you choose SQLite for your own projects? First one is easy to set up and use. It's super easy to set up, like one single file. You don't need to manage a server, as you already know. Very, very straightforward. Second one, it has a great, or it's pretty much great DB for running tests because it has in-memory kind of stuff. So you don't need to save to the file. It's very lightweight. So most of the time, developers use SQLite for running tests. Third one, which is very important, the cost of running SQLite is $0 because you don't need to run a separate server and you run it against or right alongside your code. It's pretty much like another file of your projects, pretty much. And of course, the fourth one, no extra servers to manage. So having an extra server to manage for a database is not easy and it costs time and a lot of effort as well, especially if you're not using a managed one. And if you're using a managed one, you're going to be paying quite a lot. And even though that, you're still going to do some management as well. Now, we come to the other important part here is actually, of course, you cannot always use SQLite. And when would you not use SQLite or choose SQLite? First one is handling millions of operations, even though like I've heard from people, I haven't tried it personally, but I've heard from people on Twitter that they are actually being able to do millions of operations at the same time on SQLite and completely fine, no drawbacks, no performance issues. So I think that's still good. Maybe you can try it, maybe not, I don't know, but I'm just putting that in here. Second one is advanced features. Of course, SQLite is very lightweight, doesn't have that much of features. Something like, a queue system, like the Postgres queue system, or I don't know, something that is super advanced that you might need because Postgres compared to SQLite has tons of more features. Third one is very, very advanced features. As I said before, it's all about features, so it depends on what features you want to use. But if you are looking for a SQL sort of database that is easy and it has create, read, update, delete, most basic features, backups and stuff like that, SQLite is more than enough. And recently, of course, with the rise of AI, some people are starting to use the PG vector in here for Postgres for integrating the vectors inside of their databases. And of course, you might want to use Postgres for that. So yes, it all depends on the scenario and how you want to handle your application. But as I said before, most of the times, for me, when I deploy a new application, especially when you're starting out with a simple application, you want to an indie hacker, you're building your first big thing, SQLite, I mean, dude, it's just going to make your life quite easier. Just move along with it. And later on, maybe think about scaling to something different. And if it doesn't work, try again with another project, another SQLite thing. Now, all the things in here like backups and they are super straightforward and other questions. Now, the most important part is actually scaling horizontally and keeping multiple SQLite databases in different servers and making sure they are synchronized in real time. How can you do that? That's what I want to talk about in this video. I'm just going to show a quick demo of how I did it on my own sort of SaaS projects, on my own application in production, and how you can do it too with a super simple setup as well. So if you've already noticed, for my SaaS app in here, I'm using Flyo. Flyo is a great actual sort of cloud hosting sort of platform that gives you so much control, a lot of awesome features, very, very simple developer experience. Just from the CLI, you can deploy your application and you've got tons of servers running already. I mean, once you use it, you're going to feel what I'm trying to tell you in here because sometimes it's very hard to communicate the benefits of using Flyo over something like AWS or a bare minimum VPS from DigitalOcean, because Flyo just gives you an extra more features that's not going to make you wander around yourself and thinking maybe what I'm doing wrong or something like that. So just going to make your life a little bit more easier. So this is the app I've deployed using SQLite in here. It's an ebook that, it's the application here. It allows you to purchase the ebook and it allows you to restore the purchases, send emails. So it works with AWS SCS. It works with an R2 storage, like the Cloudflare S3 compatible storage. It has tons of features. So it's it has a bunch of stuff going on. And for all this kind of stuff like purchases, restoring purchases, storing transactions, all kind of things, I'm using SQLite and most importantly, distributed SQLite with Fly.io. So if you're interested on learning how to write solid React clean code and better React code with simple to advanced examples in React with applying the solid principles in here that were introduced first in oriented object programming, this ebook is going to be for you because it's going to give you everything, all the information you need to write cleaner code in React with best practices, naming conventions, exceptions handling, and so much more. So just head over to solidreact.dev. You're going to find a link description below if you are interested in buying this. And of course, we're offering purchasing power parity just to facilitate the global learning and provide discounts for most people in most countries, of course. So go ahead and check it out. All right, so back to our horizontal scaling and synchronization of a SQLite database between multiple machines. So how did we do that? So first, starting with live streaming here, which is a great sort of like library that allows you to back up your SQLite to AWS S3, Azure, Google Cloud, even SFTP, like anywhere you want. So you can continuously back up your SQLite databases. This project has made it so much easier to work with SQLite, and a lot of people were, endorsing SQLite because of this project. And later on, Fly.io decided to buy this project in here, integrated on their own, even though it's still open source. So they integrated their own, and they're now calling it LiteFS, which is completely managed by them, so you don't have to do anything besides like introducing or creating a config file of how you want to handle that backup and synchronization inside of Fly.io. And once you're deploying, Fly.io is going to take care of like synchronization of like this whole SQLite sort of databases and what's going on behind the scenes. So technically just running one file SQLite database inside of your machine, and Fly.io in here using LiteFS is going to handle or take care of like the synchronization and the backups and everything behind the scenes. So you can go ahead and read more about this on the LiteFS documentation in here inside of Fly.io. So you can just LiteFS in here, which is distributed SQLite. You can read more how it works, what is the motivation behind the project, why this is very cool. And I'm telling you, this is super cool. I've used it. I worked with it for quite some time. This is amazing. And of course, there's another blog post that explains, which is from the author of Flightstream, who joined and works right now at Fly.io. So he introduces or basically explains everything behind the scenes on this blog post with his own words. I really enjoyed reading through this because it gave me a background of SQLite before and after LiteFS, or before Livestream and after Livestream, and how it is super easy to work with SQLite and production grade with distributed SQLite nowadays versus before. All right, so let's go ahead and learn how we can deploy our Next.js project. So for example, here we've got a super simple Next.js project that utilizes SQLite using the Prisma ORM. And this project simply tells you like, if you access it, like the user accesses, it's just going to tell you your IP address in here, the country you're accessing the website from. It displays like the latest paragraph and the ability to update the latest paragraph, like save that, which is going to create a latest paragraph inside of the SQLite database in here for you. And it's going to like showcase it right over here. So the reason I'm doing this specific demo in here to tell you exactly where the country is coming from and the data that is latestly fetched from the database is to showcase how the distributed system would work and the synchronization between different machines running on different SQLite databases using LiteFS. So it's clear in here, the project uses Next.js because of a Next config in here. So everything runs in Next.js using Prisma. And if you check out the DB folder in here, it has SQLite.database, which is, our actual database that has the records. These are actually the contents of the paragraphs I'm saving. And it always fetches the most recent one to display it on the website, just to showcase how, synchronized that is and between different regions, right? All right, so first we want to deploy this to Fly.io. And of course, for Fly.io, you're going to go through like the setup and install the Fly CLI. I'm not going to go through the details about this one because it's super simple. Just install the CLI and you're going to be able to access that throughout your terminal. So once you've got the Fly CLI in here, you can go in and run the fly launch command. So you just do fly launch. Do not care about this one here because I have multiple projects running on Fly already, and I want to make sure I run it on like a testing sort of environment or a testing organization to be a little more transparent. So just run the fly launch in here. Once you click on it, it's just going to go ahead and detect the framework. It's got, detects the Next.js application in here. It's going to create like the app inside of it here for like the fly config. It's going to tell you exactly, like ask you in here a couple of stuff like the name. You already did Next.js SQLite in here. The region in here by default is going to default to Amsterdam, Netherlands. And they're telling you, this is the fastest region for you because I have a VPN just taking me to Netherlands or Amsterdam, and shared CPU 1x, 1 GB of RAM. I'm just going to choose all of these. Postgres, no. Redis, no. And Tigris, no. So do you want to tweak these settings before you're proceeding? Absolutely not. So I'm just going to go, do not tweak any settings. Just go ahead and put the fly config for me, and we should be good to go. So now install another dev dependency in here, fly.io Docker file. It's going to go ahead and generate for you a Docker file depending on what you're using. And because we're using in here, we're simply just like using Next.js. So it's going to detect Next.js. It's going to create a Docker file for you. So you see Docker file in here in a fly.toml, and even created a docker.ignore for the database in here for like Prisma, or no, not Prisma, but there's a couple of stuff in here going on, which is pretty great. And everything is automatic using Fly. It just generates everything for you on the fly as well. So the config in here is pretty straightforward as well. It just like detects that you're running this on port 3000. So it opens out that port. It has a destination for mounting the data on a specific volume. It has the up in here, the name of the application, and the primary region is Amsterdam. And right now, if we check out the terminal, it's actually deploying our first application. So it's just doing, the whole deployment behind the scenes, and it's creating the database. And I think everything is going pretty smooth, but we're going to switch from regular database kind of thing into LiteFS in a second for having that pretty awesome synchronization and distributed SQLite features. And if we go and check out the terminal in here, we've got the application deployed for us successfully on this new domain, nextjs-sqlite.fly.dev. So I'm going and copy this one. I'm just going to paste it. I already did paste it in here. There you go. It works absolutely perfectly, and even the database works. If we go ahead and try to do an update in here, like super simple updates, go ahead and save this one. It's going to see like updated. This is the latest results. That means that the SQLite database has been deployed and it's working inside of Fly in here, and it's detecting my IP address. Everything is just flawlessly working without any issues. So Fly did detect the SQLite, the Next.js application, and deployed it using one single simple command. All right, the second step in here is actually configuring LiteFS in here for distributed SQLite. How simple can we do that? As we've seen already, Fly.io is pretty simple, already deployed that in like 5 minutes. So adding LiteFS is also super simple as well using the LiteFS configuration. So if we go ahead and jump back in here, I'm going to copy the LiteFS sort of file from one of our projects. And I'm just going to come back in here. I'm going to create litefs.yaml. And it has to be a YAML config file. And I'm just going to go in and paste that one in here. And I'm going to go through the config in a second. So this is going to be like where the directory is going to, the FUs is going to be mounted to. So just leave this as LiteFS in here. It's going to be like the directory where you will be able, or your specific application going to access the database. So it's going to be /LiteFS. It's like a symbolic link or something. This is the data directory, and you've got to put this inside of a persistent volume inside of Fly.io. So whatever volume Fly.io has created already for you. So to check that out, you go to fly.toml mount section, and you're going to see the source in here. This is actually the volume name, and this is the destination where it's mounted in sort of your like virtual machine. So you're going to change the name of this one. I'm going to go ahead and leave this one as data, and for this one, I'm just going to go and copy this specific one. So just go ahead and destination, put it inside of var lib litefs, and this is actually where our application is going to access the database specifically. So this is everything that you need to change for this one. Now, going back to LiteFS YAML in here, for the lease in here, I'm going to keep it console. This specifically just going to, whenever a specific node, let's say you've got 2 nodes, one is acting as the primary node, the second one is acting as the replica node. If for whatever reason the primary node goes down, the replica node, using the console lease in here type, is going to be able to go ahead and be elected as a primary and take the primary sort of election and become a primary. So, your server doesn't go down and it continues working perfectly. So I really advise going and using this one. There are other types you might want to go and read the documentation about, but I love this one. I've been using it so far and no issues at all. The only downside might be tricky a little bit to handle backups. So all these config in here should be the same. You can just even copy this simple config file from their documentation. That's where I got it. So that should be pretty simple. Now for the proxy part in here, this part in here is actually what address do you want to bind the LiteFS into, which is going to act as an HTTP server for you, like a proxy. So there's going to be by default an 8080. Just leave it like that. The target in here is where it's going to proxy all the requests to. So you want to put your application sort of host and port in here 4. So Next.js application is running on port 3000. So I'm going to put localhost 3000 in here and give it the database name. So the file name for that SQLite database that I want to use for TXID tracking. And you can put whatever you want in here. I'm simply just going to move this to SQLite.db in here. And for the execute command, this is actually what command should be executed once the LiteFS has been started. So the command in here, what you want to put is the command to start the Next.js server. Because now inside of the Docker file, so remember the Docker file is where the pnpm run start command was existing. Now we can completely remove this one and we're going to swap this one with LiteFS mount in here for my mounting LiteFS. And once the LiteFS is going to start mounting, it's going to, of course, when it's done, successfully mounted, it's going to start our Next.js application, which is the right way to do it. And we no longer need this DB and VM, so I'm just going to go ahead and comment this out. We still got exposing 3000, so that's pretty good. And also beside that, so you need to go a little bit up above everything happening in here, right before where you set the work directory in here, and we want to set up LiteFS in here. So we want to copy the configuration, copy from current LiteFS YAML to EDC LiteFS in here inside of the container so we could work. And the other one is actually we need to install packages for LiteFS like the FUs and the SQLite 3 in here inside of the container or the machine for it to work as well. So this is what you need to copy over there. You're going to find this whole source code in here if you ever need reference for it. In my GitHub, you're going to find a link in the description below as well. So I'm just going to push this into a completely separate new repository, and you can use this for reference. And yes, for the DB or database URL in here, you need to make sure you go ahead and change that to update it to the new one, because now we're pointing to LiteFS. So that's where LiteFS is going to be, like inside of the directory. So it's going to be /LiteFS, and make sure to do file 3 slashes because you've got already a /LiteFS in here. Then put the DB name SQLite.db that you've already put inside of the LiteFS YAML in here as a database name. So that should be good. Now, the last thing in here to go ahead and update is the proxy. So internal port in here instead of 3000. Now we want to use the LiteFS sort of proxy. So our application or Fly.io is going to expose that proxy, and the proxy is going to handle things behind the scenes of, taking the request from 8080 to 3000 and vice versa. So it's everything going to work fine in here. So that should be good. So I'm going to do a fly deploy. Just go ahead and deploy all the changes I've got in here from the Fly.io to the Docker file and, make LiteFS work again or start LiteFS. And yes, there you go. After many attempts, because I had a couple of issues, I was forgetting of how to initialize the console. So my advice to you before you fall on the trap, or the trap that I did fall onto as well. So I would really go ahead and advise you guys to go ahead and read the LiteFS documentation before jumping in. So just jump into the LiteFS, and here you can go ahead and do a speed run at adding LiteFS into your application, and this should give you everything that you need, the setup, like the stuff that you need to install, from where you need to copy. And what I missed, I missed running the fly console attach, so we could attach a console sort of instance into our machines, and you can define primary and replicas and stuff like that. So make sure to follow this one in here, because maybe something you've missed throughout the video, like this one in here, and I don't want you to fall and spend 2 hours or 1 hour debugging and stop the video debugging with this one. But there you go, finally got it running in here. So if I go ahead and do a fly machine status, this should give me the status of the different machines. I'm going to choose the only machine I've got in here, and it had to switch to Paris here, the CDJ for the environments instead of Amsterdam, because all of a sudden Amsterdam had a couple of issues, which is a capacity. So it's at full capacity. Probably Fly.io is working on expanding that or scaling that out, but for now I'm in Paris. My main rep server in here is in Paris, and everything looks to be fine in here. So it's clear in here, everything works as expected. The machine is running. If I go back in here into the next application and go ahead and refresh, you're gonna notice that everything is working absolutely fine. And it says, no paragraph saved yet. So I'm going to do saved from France, maybe. Just like that. Go ahead and save. And there you go. That has been saved. I'm going to refresh. The database has been saved. That's pretty cool. All right. So now, because we've got a machine, so we're going to go and check the machines I've got. I've got Paris, France in here. So you got only one single machine. So what you want is actually to expand it horizontally, add a completely different machine, completely different region. And I'm going to choose something like DFW, like the Texas, Dallas, to add a machine, just to give you guys an idea of how distributed system is and if how the data is synchronized between the SQLite database that lives inside of the Paris machine and the other SQLite that's going to be created inside of like Dallas, Texas sort of machine or server. So let's go ahead and do that. And luckily for us, Flyo gives a super easy CLI and a way to scale out. Like with a single command, you can scale add another machine as simple as that, like literally 0 worries. So all I do just fly, use the scale command in here, and I do counts. I want to scale it to 1, and I can do the dash region in here to specify a region. I'm going to use the region code DFW, which is Dallas, Texas, and I'm just going to go ahead and click enter. So just go ahead and use the same Docker file, use the default same configuration as the other machine that lives inside of Paris, and it's just going to go ahead and deploy this into Dallas, Texas. Completely different stuff. So I'm going to click in here. Probably not going to take too long, but it might take some time. So here it's going to tell you exactly what it's going to do. So it's going to add +1 machine for inside of the group application, which is the same group we're using in here. And Dallas, Texas in here. A size is going to be shared CPU 1x. And the volumes, of course, are going to create a volume for you. So a volume is basically like the storage where the database is going to live and your application data is going to live. Every machine needs a volume. Yeah, like that's mandatory. So you got volumes +1 in here, and you got Dallas, Texas in here as well. So I'm going to go and choose Y, click enter, and this should go ahead and create a new one. So now it's creating the volume first because, for creating a machine, a volume is required first. So I can go here into fly logs, and I can choose the instances. I'm going to choose the Dallas, Texas machine in here to check out the logs and make sure that, the Next.js server is actually running. So I'm not sure why the logs are not coming up in here, but I can go and check out logs from Grafana, like the Grafana dashboard. I already chose my instance in here, and there you go. So it looks like Next.js has been started, and it's listed in port 3000, and migrations has run, and it's using the SQLite database right over here. So I don't know if you can see that or not. I can zoom in a little bit, but yeah, we've got it right over here in here. So that means we are good to go. All right, that's super cool. So now actually it's test time to know if this database is distributed or not, or is it like synchronized? Is the different regions synchronized with the primary one? I mean, that's the whole point of the linefs thing and deploying the console stuff and all the configuration we've been doing out throughout the video. So to make sure that we got a distributed database that is synchronized between all the different nodes or the different machines, and they all have the same data instantaneously. So now we got here saved from friends to test this one, because my machine in here, my computer main machine in here, is connected to a VPN. So that's why it's telling you, oh, it's coming from friends in here. So that's actually what's telling you that's happening. So if you remember the previous setup, now we're actually inside of Next.js SQLite.fly, like the production sort of application. But before, on the local host, it was saying that we're from the Netherlands. And yes, I'm connected to a VPN from the Netherlands. So the local host in here is showing the correct information. But for some reason, when I deployed it in here, it's showing France, which is like the region of the machine where the application is hosted, which is fine, which is pretty good actually. That's basically just telling us which machine is like being proxying a request into. So of course, Fly will try to go ahead and proxy to the nearest machine. And because we're in Netherlands, so France and Paris is going to be the nearest to us. That's why it's taking us to France in here. So this is basically like on my computer in here, I'm accessing the French machine, and I'm actually submitting this saved from France, like updating the paragraph. And this is like the latest saved paragraph inside of the database. Now, in the other hand in here, I went inside of my mobile and I connect to a VPN to the United States. And luckily in here, I'm going to the Next.js SQLite.fly.dev, and it's telling me this is your IP address. You are from the United States, or simply the server I'm accessing is inside of the United States. So that means we're, Flyo is being proxying us, or is basically proxying us to the United States machine, which is pretty great, which is like the nearest for us. We don't want to go to Paris, France, because that's too far, completely different continents. So we're good in here. And as clear as in here, we're seeing the message saved from France. So that means we are having the database instance. The database is synchronized pretty much because we're getting the same data. And this United States machine should have a completely different SQLite database, right? So for example, if I go ahead and try to change this, so update it, save from the US, I go ahead and do that, click save. This should go ahead and send the database. It has updated the database. So that means, the local database has been updated, but technically speaking, behind the scenes, of how LiteFS works, it only always updates the primary only, and the replica is always just synchronized with the primary. So like as many replicas as you should have, or you would have inside of your sort of like infrastructure, it always makes it easier to update only the primary and make all the replicas follow the primary by, synchronizing them. So if you go back here to the friends version in here and then go ahead and refresh, just refresh, there you go. That's the version. So that means both of the databases, the one that exists inside of France or Paris, is synchronized with the one in the United States, all just using SQLite. And this is technically, in a very simple word, a distributed system. So anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed. This was quite a long video, but I tried to explain everything, try to explain the setup, how easy it is. Of course, sometimes you might, stumble upon a couple of issues here and there, but just following the right guides and the documentation, as it says, and reading carefully throughout the documentation. Do not skip the documentation as I did, so you don't fall in the trap. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and hope you guys are gonna choose SQLite for your next projects. See you all.